White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs is coming under increasing pressure for his attack on progressive critics of President Obama. In a recent interview with the newspaper The Hill, Gibbs blasted what he called, quote, the professional left that has likened some of Obama's policies to those of former President George W. Bush. Gibbs said, quote, these people ought to be drug tested. They will be satisfied when we have Canadian health care and when we've eliminated the Pentagon. That's not reality. They wouldn't be satisfied if Dennis Kucinich was president. On Wednesday, Robert Gibbs was repeatedly questioned about the statement during the White House press briefing.
Your esteemed substitute yesterday that you answered said that you answered honestly. Was this an honest, correct answer that you gave to those questions?
I would not contradict my able substitute.
So this was an honest answer. You're not backing away from it.
I don't think that. I think many of you all have heard frustration voiced in here and around. Sure, I doubt I said anything that you haven't already heard.
But this wasn't a mistake. It was not something you said in error.
It was born out of frustration, but I don't think it was. Again, I think it was born out of frustration.
But you stand by it. It's private frustration that you expressed publicly and accurately.
Or public frustration that was written down publicly.
Name any names, Robert?
I left my membership list back in the office.
Of the professional left?
Well, who wants to eliminate the Pentagon?
I think that wasn't that a proposal during the presidential campaign? Didn't Dennis Kucinich, or maybe it was adding the Department of Peace.
But do you feel like there's still substance to what you said, not necessarily, maybe not in the way you said it, but that there is too much of a demand or too much pressure perhaps from the left of the party, and that this...
I didn't say there's too much of a demand, I think, or too much pressure. I think that a lot of the issues that Democrats throughout the party have worked to see happen have come to fruition as part of what this president has accomplished in the first 17 months. Healthcare was an issue that was worked on for 100 years. President after president after president discussed the importance of passing something comprehensive and historic that cut how much we were paying for healthcare, that extended the life, as we saw last week, of the Medicare Trust Fund. I think those are accomplishments that we all should be proud of, regardless of whether it encompasses 100% of what we had wanted in the beginning.
And what about the rest that is outstanding? Gay rights, Guantanamo?
I would say this: all things that the president made commitments on and is focused on doing.
White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs defending the Obama administration's record and his comments on the so-called professional left. One organization that's been particularly critical of some of President Obama's policies has been the American Civil Liberties Union. In a new report called Establishing a New Normal, the ACLU writes, quote, on a range of issues, including accountability for torture, detention of terrorism suspects, and use of lethal force against civilians, there's a very real danger that the Obama administration will enshrine permanently within the law, policies, and practices that were widely considered extreme and unlawful during the Bush administration. Well, Jamil Jaffer joins us here in New York. He's the Deputy Legal Director at the ACLU and one of the authors of the report. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Your response to Robert Gibbs?
Well, you know, I think it's disappointing when the press secretary responds to the thoughtful criticism in that way. I also think it debases political debate to respond in that way, and I think that the press secretary, as part of his job, is supposed to set a tone, and I don't think that's the right tone. But our report is really, you know, it's about the policies. We stand by the content of the report, and the same report that criticizes the president for President Obama for adopting some of the Bush administration's policies gives President Obama all kinds of credit for the things he's done right. We tried to be fair on the report. We think the report is fair. We think it's important to give the administration credit when they get things right, and we did. And we think it's important to hold the administration accountable when they get things wrong, and that's what we're trying to do.
And what were some of those things that they did right that you've
in the very first days of the administration, the president announced that that they would shut down the CIA's black sites, that they would disavow torture. They committed to close Guantanamo. That hasn't gone as everybody had hoped, but they committed to close Guantanamo, and I think everybody recognizes that they intended to do it. a few months into the administration, they released some of the torture memos that the Bush administration had kept secret on the basis of a national security pretext. And all of those decisions were the right decisions by the administration, and the administration deserves credit for having put the power and the prestige of the presidency behind those kinds of decisions. Unfortunately, if you take a step back and you look more broadly at what the administration is doing on national security in particular, what you see far too often is the administration endorsing policies that most of us recognize were extreme under the last administration. And in fact, in some cases, you see this administration going even further than the last administration did. I don't think it's helpful to engage in this conversation of is President Obama better or worse than President Bush. I think that you have to look at these things on a policy-by-policy basis, and that's what we tried to do. So
why don't you list those areas where you are deeply concerned?
Sure. So some of the places we point to in the report include the endorsement of indefinite detention for some of the people who are now held at Guantanamo, the failure to hold accountable the people who endorse torture. The last administration built a framework for torture, but this administration, we say in the report, is building a framework for impunity, allowing those senior officials who endorse torture to get away with it, leaves torture on the table as a permissible policy option, if not for this president, then for the next president.
And who do you think should be held accountable?
Well, you know, these are decisions. The decision to endorse torture was a decision that was made at the highest levels of the Bush administration. We know that, for example, Secretary Rumsfeld signed interrogation orders for use at Guantanamo that included interrogation methods that violated the War Crimes Act. We know that lawyers in the Office of Legal Counsel wrote legal memos that were meant to authorize torture. So the problem we have now is that there is, you know, as you know, the Obama administration has initiated a criminal investigation, but the criminal investigation is very narrow. It examines only a handful of incidents in which contractors or CIA interrogators went beyond the authority that was invested in them, and nobody, as far as we know, is looking into the responsibility and the criminal liability of the people who endorsed torture and authorized it, and that seems indefensible to us.
And the administration's repeated invoking of national security